Welcome one and all, this is the Ancient Journey. On today's journey, mass hysteria. But before we get started, don't forget, if you enjoy the video, please give us a like and a share, and subscribe. And don't forget to turn on those notifications. And if there's a story out there you'd like to see us turn into a video, drop it in the comments section down below. Now let's get started. We live in a world where a constant bombardment of threats and fears are transmitted to us minute by minute, hour by hour. In fact, most people are carrying a rumor mill around in their pocket. You're probably within arm's reach of one right now, and you may even be watching me on it. In some cases, however, rumors or the media have succeeded in creating a mass hysteria among the population. Real or imaginary threats have caused mass panic, injuries, and even death. This has happened throughout time, and it will happen again. In July of 1518, a woman in Strasbourg, Germany began dancing away in the streets, and soon there were 2 people dancing, and then 3, and then many, many more. The dancing lasted until early September of the same year. Soon the town magistrate, bishop, and doctors had to intervene and place some of the folks into a local hospital. It was said that some people danced until they died. There are sources indicating that up to 15 people per day died from dancing, but this is a disputed fact. Most accounts list a woman named Frau Trophea as the person who got the dancing started, and most accounts agree that up to 400 persons were dancing at any one time. There are many theories about the cause of the dancing plague, but none have ever really panned out. However, several other cases of the dancing plague were reported in the same region around the same time. And while many folks turn to the radio to find music to dance to, the next story shows how the radio became a source of mass hysteria in the United States. On October 30th, 1938, Orson Welles settles behind the CBS radio microphone and begins to tell an hour-long tale about the end of the world. Welles' show is structured to seem like a normal radio program, but has several mixed-in news flashes and bulletins that are crafted to make the listener think that aliens have arrived and are invading across the entire country. The story details that the military has no way to stop the invasion, and details poison clouds in New York City, a devastating heat ray, mass casualties. When the broadcast begins, a disclaimer is given that the story is fake, but many listeners apparently miss that notice. During the broadcast, the producer is ordered to interrupt the story to assure the listeners again that it's a fake story and not real, but the order comes too late. Second clarification is never given. Soon the studio is filled with policemen trying to stop the show. The mayor of a Midwestern town has called the studio, yelling that he had mobs of people in his streets in a panic. The telephone switchboard crashes, now overloaded with calls. Signs in Times Square read "Orson Welles causes panic" in bright lettering. Callers into other radio shows accuse hosts of covering up the truth when they try to deny that this story is real. Soon the overload on the phone lines causes a short circuit, and now phone lines are down in many towns, only adding fuel to the already raging fire of panic that is engulfing the U.S. People are already on edge in the U.S. Every night the radio had been broadcasting news of the deteriorating situation in the world. Every night they were hearing story after story of the world being drug into a second world war. Newspapers, having lost a great deal of advertising to radio, beat the story to death, claiming falsely that the panic had been much worse than it actually was. Imagine that. Media drumming up a story just to attract more readers. But at least the people in Tanzania could laugh about it. On January 31st, 1962, a boarding school there noticed that there was an epidemic of laughter. 3 girls had begun laughing uncontrollably, and eventually it had spread through the entire school, affecting 95 out of 159 students. The adult staff were unaffected by the epidemic, which lasted up to 16 days. The school was closed down on March 18th. The epidemic spread to other nearby villages in April and May. The boarding school attempted to reopen in May, but had to close again in June as the epidemic had now spread to a neighboring middle school, affecting 48 students. The school was actually sued for allowing the epidemic to spread. The symptoms, along with the laughter, included fainting, flatulence, rashes, screaming, and respiratory problems. In all, 14 schools were shut down and over 1,000 people were affected. The only cause ever attributed to the disturbance was some form of mass hysteria or illness. The laughing epidemic died down some 18 months after it began, and the girls who were affected by it should have been glad that they weren't alive in colonial Massachusetts. There, over 200 people were accused of witchcraft over the course of a year, with over 19 executed by hanging. The Salem witch trials took place starting in 1692, with arrests taking place in numerous towns in the region. The term witch hunt is used today for a reason. The Salem witch trials were a textbook example of a failure of due process and also of mass hysteria. 78% of those accused of witchcraft were women. And what mystical powers did these women possess? Make people believe that they were indeed witches? Well, that really could have been just about anything. Some were brought up on charges for being in a bad mood or disagreeing with a neighbor. Others were arrested when a neighbor's child would fall ill. A feud between family members could result in someone being charged with practicing witchcraft. Once you were arrested, it was in your best interest to indict some co-conspirators, and until you did, you could expect to be tortured, oftentimes by having larger and larger weights placed on you until you confessed or were crushed to death. While you were waiting for trial, chances were very good you could die in a very unsanitary jail. If you lived long enough to be found guilty, you were sure to be hanged. And while the Puritans accused of witchcraft would wear black, walking around wearing white in one town could get you killed. In 1803, people in the Hammersmith area began reporting seeing the ghostly apparition of a local man who had committed suicide. The cause of the apparition was that the man, despite having killed himself, had been buried in a church cemetery, something which was not allowed by church doctrine at the time. The ghost, supposedly very tall and wearing all white, had been accused of grabbing women walking near the cemetery late at night. The attack so frightened some that they died of shock just a few days later. Servants, night watchmen, pregnant women were all accosted by the ghost. As the story spread, townsfolk became more and more panicked. Armed citizens began patrolling the town, leading to more disasters. A bricklayer, wearing the normal clothing of his trade, had been walking home late one night, only to be accosted by an armed vigilante. Assuming he was confronting the white-clad ghost, the vigilante fired, killing the bricklayer. Mass hysteria over the ghost had gotten out of hand and caused a murder. The publicity causes the true ghost to come forward. John Graham, an elderly shoemaker in the area, admits to pretending to be the ghost by wearing a white sheet and scaring people. There is no record that John Graham was ever punished for starting the mass hysteria. Thanks for watching, and thanks for sharing the journey.